So Julie va a comenzar a compartir su pantalla, entonces ustedes van a ver lo que puede ver ella y va a comenzar la presentación.
Okay, with a thumbs up, can you see what is on my screen?
Pongo un dedo arriba si usted puede ver lo que Julia está presentando en la pantalla.
Okay, perfect. So again, this is where you can sign in and let us know that you were here. There is also on that sign in, the last question is questions and comments.
So ahí a donde ella tiene su flechita, las letras azules, ahí es donde usted puede poner su asistencia, poner su nombre para asistencia y también en ese formulario abajo también puede poner comentarios o preguntas que tenga.
And if you complete it now and you realize at some point during the meeting that you have another question and you'd rather share it there, you can go back in and sign in again.
Si usted firma ahora y después se da cuenta a través de la conversación que tiene más preguntas o comentarios, puede volver a entrar a esa página y
Rosa, you're breaking up a little bit.
Oh, no.
Okay, so our goal today is just to share with you the plans that we submitted to the Department of Education for reopening and to talk a little bit about the timeline, the process, and next steps.
Nuestra meta hoy es compartir con ustedes el plan que tuvimos que entregarle al Departamento de Educación y hablarle de cómo es los cambios que hemos hecho para ICS para este año escolar.
So this happened yesterday too. Somebody is drawing on the presentation.
So alguien está dibujando en la presentación, por favor, paren.
So this first slide, and one other thing I will say is that I will pause every once in a while to look and see if anybody is waiting to come in, but sometimes somebody will text you because they know you. Please feel free to unmute and let me know. So I can do this. Right now there's 2 people, but sometimes I do not know.
Julie va a tomar pausas de vez en cuando si hay alguien que quiere entrar a esta presentación. Si alguien le está llamando a usted diciendo que quiere entrar a la presentación, por favor, puede interrumpir a Julie y dejarle saber que hay alguien esperando.
And for those 2 people who just entered, on the first slide of this presentation, which is in the chat, you can sign in and then you can follow us. So I want to review the timeline. On June 19th, the Department of Education gave us the guidelines, or what they called the guardrails, for creating these plans. We turned in our plans on the 17th of July, and by the 31st of July, we should be getting feedback from the Department of Education. The governor is indicating that on the 17th of August, she will let us know which of the scenarios the state is going to go with, and I'll talk more about that in a second. And on the 31st, the entire state goes back to school with a couple of exceptions if you have a slightly modified calendar.
Entonces, la cronología de este proceso pasó así. El 19, can you go back? El 19 de junio, el Departamento de Escuela de Rhode Island nos dio como el guía, las direcciones para nosotros seguir para crear estos programas. Ok. El 17 de julio, nosotros entregamos estos escenarios, nuestro plan al Departamento de Educación de Rhode Island. El 31 de julio, el Departamento Escolar de Rhode Island nos va a dar los comentarios de qué funciona y cosas que tenemos que cambiar. Entonces, el 18 de agosto, la gobernadora va a tomar la decisión sobre cuál es el plan que las escuelas van a seguir comenzando el 31 de agosto, que es el primer día de escuela para el estado completo.
So I'm going to pause there and just see if there are any questions. Please unmute yourself if you have a question, or you can put it in the chat.
Vamos a parar aquí un momento. Si alguien tiene una pregunta o un comentario, por favor, encienda su voz y entonces puede hablarlo aquí o escribir su pregunta en el chat.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
It's Holly Beth.
Hey, Holly Beth.
And just to carry on if the question's answered later in the presentation, but there's been a lot of pushback about the governor's timeline on waiting until August 17th. And I'm wondering if ICS is going to stick to that timeline, or do you think we're going to make a decision before that and just go?
La pregunta que hizo la mamá es que han habido mucha como inquietud sobre cuándo es que la gobernadora va a tomar su decisión, el 17 de agosto. Entonces la pregunta es que si ICS va a esperar hasta el 17 de agosto para decidir cuál es el plan que vamos a seguir o si vamos a tomar esa decisión antes de tiempo.
So, Holly Beth, I also am very concerned about that timing. These are very complicated and very distinct experiences. And so you'll see on one of the last slides, the second to last slide, for sort of my priorities. One is getting a decision as soon as possible. Now that we have been communicating now after today and you know, the staff and with families, the plans, I really, you know, a next step is advocacy for a few things, but among them is a very quick decision. And we, you know, internally need to be able to plan well for what it is that we're doing. And so I don't know that I can answer the question yet, whether we will go rogue, but I am trying to push within organizations such as the League of Charter Schools, even talking with union leadership and other organizations to really put that pressure on the governor. There is the possibility, she has been indicating that possibly after the 31st on August 1st, that they may be able to give some kind of indication, but they're still sticking to the 17th. And I'm gonna go on to the next slide because I think it'll explain where she is coming from. Rosa?
Okay. So, para contestar la pregunta, después que nos den los comentarios y bueno, ahora, pero Julie ha estado hablando con uniones, está hablando con la Liga de Escuelas Charter y entonces están abogando para que esta decisión se tome más rápido. Ha oído que tal vez después del 31, como al principio de agosto, la gobernadora pueda que tome una decisión y le deje saber a la escuela, a las escuelas cuál es el plan, pero hasta ahora no ha pasado, como no se ha tomado una decisión.
So this next slide, there are 3 slides. They are in the 3 languages, so you can go on the language that is easiest for you to read.
So, hay 3 pantallas, las próximas 3 pantallas dan la misma información, pero una en inglés, una en español y una en portugués.
And this,
Vaya a la pantalla que usted pueda entender.
and this was in the letter that I sent. Estaba en la carta que yo mandé. So basically, this is based on the community spread of COVID-19. So if there is substantial spread, then we will go full distance learning for all. If there is moderate to minimum spread, then we will do either limited or partial. And if there's minimum to no spread, then we will have full in-person for all. I believe the reason why the governor chose the 17th is based on spread. If they want to see where we are 2 weeks out and make that decision. That is understandable from that point of view, but from the point of view of planning for us as well as for families, it is really late. I agree with Holly Beth. And so we are really pushing to make the decision sooner than just the 2 weeks in terms of, I believe, what is the health consideration in terms of spread. And I'll let Rosa describe that, and then I'll talk more about what each of these scenarios are.
So, cada plan está basado en, dependiendo de cómo esté la infección en el estado. Entonces, si tenemos una infección como sustancial, entonces el plan sería distancia completa, aprendizaje por distancia. Si el virus está mínimo a moderado, entonces podemos escoger de 1 a 2 planes, uno que se llama parcial y el otro limitado. Y si la infección está a su mínimo, entonces la expectativa es que todo el mundo regrese en persona tiempo completo. Entonces, por eso es que pensamos que la gobernadora quiere esperar hasta el 17 de agosto para ver el estado del estado, cómo es que...
Pero es tarde para planificar.
Sí.
So distance learning for all is more or less what we did in the spring, but obviously, and I'll share with you some of the learnings, it would be done in a more, in a much better way because we are planning it and we learned a lot from the fall. But nobody would be coming into the school.
Entonces el plan de distancia completo va a ser como lo hicimos en la primavera. Nadie viene al edificio, todo el mundo, maestros, niños, están en sus casas dando la enseñanza.
Moderate to minimum spread would be limited or partial. And the difference between that is that partial is having either part of the school or part of the district come back and part maybe not coming back. And so, for example, if you had a K to 12 district and they decided that the high school students would not come back, that part of the school would not come back to in-person, they would work from a distance, and K to 8th grade would come back and they would use some of the facilities in order to accommodate the need to have more space. At a place like ICS, it could be that part on one day, part on another day. It could be that part of our students, let's say K1, 2, I'm just giving hypothetical examples, came back and 3, 4, 5 did not come back. Limited is where overall everybody is distant learning, but you're just bringing back a limited number of students that are most vulnerable. So these could be students who we know did not do well under the distance learning model, students who we know did not do well because they had nobody to help them with using a computer, for example, students who we know are in abusive situations at home, students who may be vulnerable in terms of food, but it's a very limited population based on certain criteria.
Entonces, los próximos 2 planes, el parcial sería, devuelven a la escuela parte de la población y entonces la otra parte se quedará en la casa. Son un ejemplo de un distrito. Los niños de la secundaria tal vez se quedarían en la casa tomando su instrucción a distancia y entonces grados kinder a octavo regresarían en persona. Entonces, usarían las escuelas secundarias para entonces separar a esos niños de kinder a octavo. ICS, nosotros traeríamos parte de los niños unos días y entonces la otra parte otros días para reducir el número de niños en cada salón. Para el plan limitado, básicamente la mayoría de los estudiantes estarían recibiendo instrucción a distancia y entonces traeríamos en persona a los niños que sean más vulnerables. Por ejemplo, los niños que de verdad no pudieron aprender vía distancia, se le hizo difícil. Niños tal vez que están en hogares donde existe abuso, niños con tal vez bajo de nivel y entonces niños que necesiten como comida. Entonces, esos es varios ejemplos de quién vendría en persona si estamos limitados.
Full in-person is where 100% of the school operates. There is some options for distance learning for those who might be immune compromised or have other reasons to need to not come to school.
Entonces, el plan de regresar completamente en persona, todavía hay como opciones para aprendizaje a distancia. Eso sería para niños que tienen problemas de, que tienen su sistema oh my God,
Inmunológico.
Gracias. Comprometido o que no puedan venir. Pero entonces una parte bien pequeña estaría a distancia y el resto estaría en persona.
So if you click on this slide, it will take you to the overall guidance from the Department of Education.
Si usted toca en esta pantalla, lo va a llevar al plan que nosotros le sometimos al Departamento de Educación de Rhode Island.
So I don't know what happened. Somebody, yikes. Somebody removed my, the plan was here in the title. I will put it back, the whole plan.
So,
you're a collaborator, Rosa. Can you, on the PowerPoint, just put back in plan and link it to our plan? It's in the, if not, I can do it later.
No, it's there, well, okay.
Within the plan, yeah, I'm sorry, this was here and it looks like somebody was able to erase it. I'm not sure how, but there are, here, let me just find it.
I see it in mine, Julie.
You see it in yours?
And I'm in every, like I see it.
Okay, it's there. I didn't see the language. So if you click on that, you can find our plan. And so basically, this outline has a message from leadership, vision, what we learned from the spring, and then the components, which are these 4 individual plans, and how we will communicate. I just want to go over this. I'm not going to take you into each of these areas, but just so you, if you do look in it, understand how it works. For each of those 4 areas, we have to, they decided what these were, but either provide assurances or evidence. And then if you go down, they have the assurances in a separate section. Those are everything that was in this first column. And they have the evidence in the second column. So this is where I need to provide the evidence. And then at the very bottom, after you go through those 4 sections, is where we have our message. This is the letter that I sent to you. You can see it in the 3 languages there. And then the vision, goals, how we came about the plan, what we learned, and links to the plans themselves. So that's just the overall structure of this plan.
Entonces, para explicarle la estructura del plan que le entregamos al Departamento de Escuela de Rhode Island. Can you get to the chart? Yeah, okay. Entonces, hay diferentes secciones. Entonces, al principio, necesitamos poner un mensaje de los directores, nuestra visión, y entonces los 4 escenarios, los 4 planes. Más abajo, ellos nos dan, hay como 4 secciones como estas. Entonces, para cada de estos puntos tenemos que dar asegurancias o proveer evidencia de nuestro plan. Entonces, si seguimos para abajo, estas crucecitas son lo que estamos asegurando que vamos a hacer, y entonces en esta parte hay enlaces de la evidencia de los documentos que comprueba cómo vamos a hacer las cosas. Y esa sigue ese formato para todas las secciones. Después viene la carta que nosotros le mandamos a ustedes los padres por correo electrónico. Si usted toca el enlace azul, está en los 3 idiomas. Ahí solamente en el plan está en inglés. Y entonces esta es la visión y los principios que nos guían. Ellos dieron 5 que son rojos. ICS puso 3 más, agregó 7, 8, 9. Sí. Y entonces también hicimos un estudio de las fortalezas y las deficiencias entre marzo y junio del año pasado. Y entonces a partir de ahí, ¿qué cambios vamos a hacer para mejorar el aprendizaje el próximo año escolar?
So for any of you who've ever written the grant, this was one of the uglier ones to write. So for the principles, as Rosa said, the ones in red are RIDE's guiding principles, and then we added 3 of our own. So safety, transparency, being equitable, listening, making quick decisions, being decisive, supporting staff and families, maintaining, so actually I think that was one of theirs too, I didn't put it in red here, making sure that we, to the best of our ability, maintain fidelity to our programs, realizing that we will need to address social and emotional learning in a more intense way, and providing as much predictability as possible for families and staff.
Okay, let me just
This is not yet translated. We are translating parts of this that we know won't change, but we haven't caught up with all of it.
Entonces, los 5 principios que dio RIDE son poner la seguridad primero, ser transparente con todos los planes, todas las comunicaciones, tener equidad entre todos los miembros de la comunidad, escuchar a todos los miembros de la comunidad, tomar decisiones rápidamente, ser flexible, y entonces apoyar a nuestra familia, las familias, nuestro personal, a los estudiantes, tomar toda medida para mantener la fidelidad a nuestros programas de lenguaje dual y el bachillerato internacional, y nuestros programas de enseñanza social y emocional. También uno de nuestros principios es lidiar enfocarnos en el aprendizaje social y emocional para los niños y para todos. Y entonces, por último, darle que todo sea predicho, como que podamos ver, los padres y todos puedan ver qué es lo que viene, qué es lo que va a pasar, y que no haya ninguna sorpresa.
So the process of creating this, there were about 5 of us that wrote the document, but really it was with contributions from the whole community. So there are surveys that we did with families and staff over the spring as well as the summer. We've had meetings with grade level teams, phone calls, emails with staff as well as with families. We had a reopening committee that met, and again, we've been continuing to talk with individuals.
So, nuestro proceso, aunque 5 personas oficialmente escribieron este plan, nuestro proceso involucró a muchas personas de nuestra comunidad. Le hicimos encuestas, muchas encuestas a ustedes, los padres, a los maestros. Hemos tenido reuniones con maestros de los grados específicos, los maestros especiales, la trabajadora social. Hemos hecho muchas llamadas a diferentes distritos a ver qué es lo que está pasando, a la gobernadora, a la comisionada, y entonces a través de también comunicando por correo electrónico para recibir toda la información para poder hacer este plan.
So I just want to click on this, and again, I apologize that it is only in English, but this details a little bit of how we got the information. In addition, I also had a classroom during the spring, and every day I sent a message to teachers, and it was a way for me to check in with that. And so I have, and sometimes there were longer surveys. But you can see that what the findings were, and they're grouped into these different categories. And then if we are in person in any way, these are the ways that we will respond. And if we are learning at a distance in any way, these are the ways that we will respond.
Entonces, este formulario que otra vez le pedimos disculpa que no está todavía en español y en portugués, pero fue un estudio basado en conversaciones con los maestros, otra vez las encuestas a los padres, y también todos los días le tomábamos como la temperatura a los maestros para ver cómo se sentían con el aprendizaje, con los niños, con el contacto. Entonces, can you go down, Julie, so I can to the chart? Entonces, en la hilera a la izquierda, eso fue lo que encontramos. Entonces, en el medio es, si estamos en persona, así es como vamos a resolver esa situación. Y si estamos aprendiendo a distancia, así es como vamos a resolver esta situación. Este formulario se va a traducir pronto, entonces se lo mandamos a todos para que ustedes vean el proceso y lo que estamos pensando hacer.
And feel free to give us feedback if you have anything to add.
Y si tienen alguna pregunta o algo que quieren decir, por favor, suba su mano y comparta.
So the last part of the plan are the 4 plans. So we needed to create a plan for health and safety, for instruction, for social, mental, and emotional health, and for operations. So I'm going to click, for example, on the health plan.
Entonces tuvimos que crear 4 planes. Uno de seguridad y salud, un plan para instrucción, uno para apoyo social, emocional, y entonces uno para las operaciones del edificio.
So this plan was created primarily by Rosa, our school nurse, and she's done it in conjunction with meeting with the Department of Health, Dr. Fox, and other people. So I'm going to go to the table of contents, and you can see the kinds of things that are here. And again, RIDE had a list of things that we needed to give assurances as well as evidence for, but this is about being safe in the building, about wearing a mask, about washing, about isolating, etc.
Entonces, la enfermera Rosa escribió esta parte del plan de salud y seguridad. Ella lo hizo en conjunto con el doctor Fox, que es el doctor que nos aconseja a ICS, y en conjunto con el Departamento de Salud. Entonces, Julie está enseñando la tabla de contenido para que ustedes vean algunos de los puntos que el Departamento de Escuela quiere que nosotros nos enfoquemos, como en máscaras, en separación de personas que están infectadas, lavarse las manos, cosas así.
I'm not going to click on the other ones because you can look at them, and I'm happy to have a conversation with you about any of them. But I want to talk a little bit about some highlights of the instructional plan, because I think that is one of the things that people want to know the most about.
Entonces, no vamos a entrar a todos los planes. Ustedes tienen este documento y pueden entrar y ver a su tiempo, pero sí vamos a hablar de partes del plan instruccional porque eso es como lo más importante para ustedes ahora.
As well as some of the operational things that we will be doing. So in order to enact this plan, to prepare for anybody coming back into this building, we need to make some changes. And so you may or may not know that we purchased the house across the street. So 318 Pleasant Street is the yellow house. This is where you used to drive to drop kids off. And it has a fairly large lot. It has a 3,700 square foot lot. So we have petitioned the city to block Tower Street. This yard, the street, and the playground will be places where students, hold on one second. What? Yeah, I'm on a Zoom call with families, but you can go. But ask Maggie if she could work with her. Okay. We will be erecting tents on that street for arrival and dismissal, as well as possible outdoor eating. On the first floor, this room, which was a classroom, will be converted into an isolation room in the event that we have a student who has symptoms of COVID. Rosa will be taking over the social workers room as well. We will have a nurse's aide working with her. And we will build a bathroom here. These 4 small offices, which are very odd to start with, will be turned into 2 offices. We'll get rid of those weird walls. And you can see that the exits are now labeled by number. And we are going to, and I'll show you more information about that in a second, have a staggered arrival and dismissal, and kids will always go in and out the same door with the exception of an emergency.
Can you move up again, Julie? Okay. Entonces, no sabemos si ustedes saben, pero hemos comprado la casa que está en la calle Pleasant, al lado de nuestra escuela. La dirección es 318 de la Pleasant. Entonces, también le hemos pedido a la ciudad de Pawtucket que por favor bloquee la calle Tower, que es la calle donde los niños entran todos los días a la llegada. Entonces, el plan es que para el recreo, algunos niños jueguen en el patio de la casa con supervisión, otros jueguen en la calle Tower, que va a estar bloqueada, y entonces otros estén en el parque. También estamos pensando poner carpas afuera en la calle Tower y para que los niños puedan comer allá afuera y también tener algunas de las lecciones afuera en el aire fresco. Los otros cambios que hemos hecho, le hemos dado a la enfermera Rosa el salón, la oficina que era de Miss Soraya, la trabajadora social, para que ella pueda poner niños ahí. Y entonces, además, vamos a convertir el salón 116, el de Miss Angie, Ese va a ser el salón de aislamiento para los niños o las personas que puedan estar infectados con el COVID. Vamos a poner una pared como de plexiglass para separar a ese grupo de la enfermera, y también vamos a poner un baño en ese salón. Las oficinas, que antes habían 4 al frente de los salones de kinder, vamos a quitar 2 de las paredes y hacer 2 cuartos más grandes. Entonces ahora van a haber 2 cuartos en vez de 4. El otro cambio es que hemos etiquetado cada puerta, cada salida. Entonces ustedes van a ver muy pronto que cada grupo va a tener una salida fija, y esa es la salida, esa es la puerta que van a usar para entrar y salir del edificio, más ninguna, para que no hayan, para que no tengamos que unir grupos estables.
The community room will not be used for meal service, and it will not be used for gathering the whole school, and it will not be used for physical education. It will be a flex space that can be used, for example, for occupational therapy, but all specials, social and emotional learning, and information and communication technology classes will be taught remotely, partly so we can have more space and reduce interaction of those teachers with large numbers of students, but we'll talk more about that in a second.
Entonces el salón comunitario no se va a usar para almuerzo, ni para reunir niños, ni para clases de educación física. En vez, se va a usar como un espacio flexible donde grupos pequeños pueden ir con sus maestros, como las maestras de educación especial o las terapistas. Las clases de especiales, arte, música, educación física, las de educación social y emocional, y las clases de tecnología, no importa el plan, esas se llevarán a cabo virtualmente. No queremos que esas personas estén en contacto ellos van a estar en contacto como con todos los niños, 370 niños. Entonces queremos evitar eso. Entonces por eso esas clases se van a dar virtualmente.
So the music room, which is where I am sitting right now, will turn into a classroom teacher's room. We will have no gathering of folks at the reception area, and reception now will be behind the window that is already here, but you may not have seen it. We will build a door, so there's another entrance to this area. Some of the non-instructional staff, such as Annette, Jorge, and Evelyn, are going to be moved over to the house to open up spaces in the building. The library is going to only have books on the periphery, and this will be a flex space. And these used to be bathrooms when this first year of the school. These were kindergarten rooms. They had been piped and closed. The pipes were closed and the floors were covered, but we are going to resurrect one bathroom here so that we can create another bathroom for students to go to.
Entonces, en el segundo piso vamos a convertir el salón de música en una clase, el segundo portugués. Nadie va a poder congregar en la oficina principal. Entonces, eso va a ser un espacio abierto. Vamos a poner a Miss Maritza atrás, hay una ventanita. Entonces, vamos a ponerla atrás de la ventanita a donde está Miss Maggie. Vamos a poner una puerta en el pasillo del segundo piso, que ahora hay una ventana para que puedan salir por esa puerta. En el salón, los salones de cuarto grado, originalmente cuando abrió ICS, había un baño ahí. Vamos a volver a poner el baño para que haya otro lugar para los niños usar. En la biblioteca vamos a cambiarla, vamos a poner a todos los libros por en las paredes, por las paredes, abrir ese cuarto, ese salón, y ese va a ser otro espacio flexible para grupos pequeños de niños con maestros, pueden ir ahí y hacer lecciones.
So I'm going to pause for 1 second because I saw a couple of questions in the chat and we've been talking a lot, but one of them was around the evidence. And so what the evidence is at this stage is RIDE says, here's a list of things you need to put in your plan. These things you don't have to show us evidence for yet. You just need to give us assurances. These things that are in the evidence column, we want to see evidence. So whether it's a policy or the actual detail of the plan. So that's really what that evidence is referring to, is at this point, they wanted us to have the evidence for it, not just say that we're going to do it. So I hope that clears up one of the questions. There was also a question about more outdoor learning. And
entonces, una persona en el chat preguntó sobre cuál es la diferencia entre asegurar y dar evidencia según el plan del departamento escolar. Hay algunas cosas, en algunos datos que ellos dicen, quieren que nosotros digamos, ok, sí, vamos a hacer eso. Pero otros puntos más específicos, ellos quieren saber la evidencia de cómo lo vamos a hacer. Entonces, esa es la diferencia. Hay cosas que tuvimos que desarrollar ahora antes de entregar el plan, y hay cosas que a manera que pase el tiempo podemos desarrollar mejor. Okay, Julie.
And the other question was about outdoor learning. The garden is definitely a spot. You know, we just need to orchestrate any of that very carefully to make sure that groups aren't overlapping, but to be developed more specifically. Any other questions that were either in the chat that I missed or something else at this point you want to ask?
So, la pregunta sobre el aprendizaje al aire libre, sí, estamos pensando que vamos a usar los lugares que le hemos dicho y también el jardín para que los niños puedan jugar afuera. Lo que tenemos que hacer es hacer un plan, un horario para que todo el mundo pueda usar esos espacios afuera seguramente. Si hay otra pregunta que tienen ahora, pueden subir su mano y dejarnos saber.
A quiet group. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit more about, and feel free to interrupt at any time. We're going to talk a little bit more about the scenarios of full in-person, partial or limited, and distance, and what the schedule would look like. I want to reinforce that I am not saying what we are doing now. I am merely describing the plans that we were asked to create.
So, vamos a empezar a hablar de los 4 escenarios. No estamos diciendo esto es lo que vamos a hacer, como en agosto. Lo que estamos ahora es explicando los planes que hemos creado y entonces vamos a ver lo que se escoge.
So if we are 100% in person, we will have staggered arrival, 8 to 8:15, 8:15 to 8:30, and 8:30 to 8:45. So we would have one group coming in, let's say group A, thinking of our Spanish English AB, would come in during those 15 minutes, and then another group, and this is to allow for appropriate social distancing. And this is across the board. If it's 100% in person or partial or limited, we would have those staggered arrivals. And I will talk in a second about the difference between 1 and 2 here.
Entonces, para el plan de 100% en persona, el parcial y el limitado, la llegada y la despedida van a ser por turnos. Entonces, como usted ve, los grupos A1, A2 llegan de 8 a 8:15, los Bs 8:15 a 8:15 a 8:30 y los grupos C 8:30 a 8:45.
So what we have done, well, let me go on to the lunch. So the lunch is now, instead of a 30-minute lunch, it's a 50-minute lunch, a 50-minute lunch, because cleaning up, setting up, washing down, all of that, going to the bathroom, because we need to keep these stable pods together. If we are in school in any way, we have a 1-hour lunch, and it involves more routine around cleaning up and washing hands and all of that.
So, en los tres escenarios, si estamos en persona en la escuela, vamos a tener una rutina nueva de 50 minutos que involucra y el almuerzo va a ser en la clase, en el salón de clase. Entonces, ese proceso va a ser limpiar el lugar, arreglar el lugar para poder comer almuerzo, lavarse las manos, después limpiar el salón y entonces también para los niños que vayan al baño.
And then again, a staggered dismissal, having children leave starting at 1:15. So if you are in group A, you would arrive at 8 and enter between 8 and 8:15, and you would leave at 1:15 to 1:30. So also a staggered dismissal, again, going only through your one door.
Entonces, otra vez, para la despedida será igual. Hay turnos en que los niños se van. So, los grupos A se van a partir de la 1:15 a 1:30, los Bs 1:30 y entonces los Cs a la 1:45.
So the school day for students, 100% in person, as I mentioned, is either 8 to 1:15, or it would be 8:15 to 1:30, etc. So, and then for the teachers, because specials are not being taught during the day, and I'll talk a little bit about how those schedules work, teachers do not have their common planning time during the day. And so from 2 to 3 is going to be teacher planning time each day. So the school day effectively ends at 1:15, 1:30, or 1:45 for students. All students will participate in a morning meeting and will sign in, read the message, and respond to the question of the day. If students are, the way we currently have it, if they're here, they will participate in the morning meeting as well. But all of them, this will be our attendance regardless of the scenario, and they will participate in those elements. And then I'll let you say that, Rosa, and then I'll go on.
Entonces, el día escolar va de 8 a 1:15 o 8:15 a 1:30, no, 8:30 a 1:30 o the other one, 8, tell me the, go back to, okay, así, como por turno, y ahí, okay. So, all right, now go back, go forward. Entonces, hemos hecho eso porque como no vamos a tener las clases especiales social y emocional y de tecnología en la escuela, los maestros no pueden tener su periodo de planeación diariamente como costumbre. Entonces, cada día los maestros van a planear de 2 a 3 de la tarde. Los lunes y los días de desarrollo profesional van a ser como fueron los viernes en la primavera, que los niños tenían el mensaje de la mañana, tenían que contestar la pregunta del día para tomar asistencia, pero los lunes en todos los planes va a ser dedicado para el desarrollo profesional de los maestros. Okay, go ahead.
So in the 4 scenarios, Mondays are virtual learning for all students. The state has given us, I think, 4 or 5 in the state calendar days for professional development. And there are several holidays. And so we are making that, it just gets balance if we use it, but it also helps with continuing to plan for all of this. Mondays are virtual learning for all students, and they will participate still by going on and reading a message.
And I already said that in Spanish.
Okay. And then Tuesday, if we were 100% in person, Tuesday to Friday would be in person, again, with the exception of those students who would be at home for reasons related to being immune compromised, etc.
Entonces, si estamos en persona, los lunes son virtual, como ya expliqué, y entonces martes a viernes todo el mundo viene en persona, con excepción a los niños o maestros que físicamente por motivos de salud no deben de estar en ese ambiente.
In partial, and I'll start with partial, we have two sets of days. So if you go to the operations plan, and I'll just show you this quickly. If you go to the operations plan, what you will see is a link, for example, to the space capacity analysis. So we walked the building and we looked at how much space we have in each of the classrooms. And for example, the square foot analysis, looking at each of the rooms, a teacher desk, and then this is just the cupboards. This is not any other shelving. If we are doing this at 6 feet of social distancing, we never are able to get 22 kids in a classroom. So this is one of the things that the governor has been saying, is that 3 to 6 feet, but to be honest, CDC still says 6 feet, and I'm not comfortable with gathering kids in a setting where we can't socially distance. So I'll talk more about this, but I find it very hard to imagine us being able to come back full in person unless a significant number of students said that they were opting out. But based on us doing that analysis, we have then, divided the students. I'm so sorry, this has a mind of its own. We've divided the students, so 22 would be full in person, unless it's not a full class. 22 in group A, 22 in group B, and 22 in group C. Both for reasons of social distancing in the classroom space, as well as overall school use, especially since I need an isolation room. Again, I don't see that happening. Rosa, I'll let you.
Okay. Entonces, para determinar el número de estudiantes en cada grupo, se hizo un análisis del espacio, de cada espacio, cada salón, todos los salones, todos los cuartos de ICS. Entonces, el resultado básicamente fue que para mantener, siguiendo las reglas del CDC, para mantener 6 pies entre cada humano en cada salón, no podemos poner 22 niños en los salones, no son lo suficientemente grandes. Entonces, por eso nosotros nos sentimos que regresar 100% en persona de verdad no va a ser posible. Como el máximo, según el análisis de niños que podemos tener en el salón, son 16. Entonces, por eso, para los otros planes, hemos decidido tener grupos de 11. Entonces sería grupo A, como ahora existe, dividirlo en 2. 11 virtual, 11 en persona a la vez. Igual con B, igual con C.
So for the partial and limited, and again, getting back to our guiding principles of trying to maintain as much of who we are and what we do, and having the dual language program, dividing the classes in 2 groups of 11 would allow us to safely place 11 children in a classroom space and have the social distancing of 6. So the idea is that we have 11 in group A, it would be A1 and A2, 11 in each, B1 and B2, 11 in each, and then also for the Portuguese, C1 and C2. We would have the ones would be in the school on Tuesdays and Wednesdays and be learning virtually on Thursdays and Fridays. The twos would be learning virtually on Tuesdays and Wednesdays and in the school on Thursdays and Fridays. So all students, except those who opt out completely, all students would have 2 days of learning with their classroom teacher and 2 days of learning virtually, and we'll talk more about that schedule. Again, the difference between partial and limited is just how we choose the students, based on dividing them in half or based on these students really need to come to school.
Entonces, para los planes parcial y limitado, los número 1, o el A1, B1, C1, vendrían a la escuela los martes y miércoles. Y entonces ellos aprenderían virtualmente jueves y viernes. Entonces los 2, A2, B2, C2, aprenderían virtualmente martes y miércoles y vendrían en persona jueves y viernes. Esto sería entonces igual para el plan limitado. La única diferencia en parcial, todo el mundo va a hacer esto, menos los niños que por motivos de salud no deben de estar en un ambiente así. Y entonces en el plan limitado se va a escoger un grupo fijo y esos siempre son los que van a venir a ICS. Los otros van a estar virtual.
So again, 100% in person. Mondays, we would have virtual learning for all students, and everybody else would be here Tuesday to Friday. Partial, again, all three, we have Mondays are virtual. Partial, we would have all students participate in the attendance activity. Tuesday, Wednesday, A, B, and C would be, groups 1 would be at ICS learning, and groups 2 would be at ICS on Thursday and Friday. And in the full distance plan, we want to maintain this for, again, the continuity piece, but it would look different in terms of what they're doing.
Entonces, otra vez, para resumir, en el plan 100% en persona, lunes virtual, todo el mundo en persona en la escuela, martes a viernes. En el parcial, lunes virtual, entonces los unos están en persona martes y miércoles y los 2 están en persona jueves y viernes. Para el limitado, otra vez es lo mismo, pero entonces depende de la clasificación del niño. Si necesita estar en la escuela en persona, va a estar, el resto virtual. Y entonces para el plan que es 100% en distancia, vamos a seguir esa misma organización. Martes y jueves, los unos están con la maestra virtualmente recibiendo instrucción directa. Entonces los jueves y viernes están virtual, pero practicando con la asistente. Y entonces los 2 es al revés. Los martes y jueves con la asistente, los jueves y viernes con la maestra.
So to show it to you in another way, one of the things that we learned in the spring is that sometimes it was really hard to coordinate schedules between Kim's live Zoom classes. If the SEL, if the social worker needed to work with somebody, special education teachers, we all were just kind of setting up meetings. And so we really want to create that guiding principle of predictability, what people know. So on the days that students are not at ICS, what we've done is for music and art and SEL, having 372 students online that you are responding to is really difficult for the teachers. And so what we've done is, instead of dividing it up every 3 days, music for trimester 1, group A will have music. Trimester 2, group B will have music, and trimester 3, group C will have music. So Hannah will have K to 5 music for group A for trimester 1, etc. And then it switches, art and SEL. For SEL, for ICT and for physical education, they will have all of the students each trimester. Chrissy will have 2nd to 5th graders in the classes, but she will work with the teachers to help them figure out what technology they need, and the teachers will teach those students. She will not do independent classes. So these classes then will all take place on the days that students are not at ICS. We thought about having teachers teach live and Zoom, but that's a very difficult task to do, to monitor both of those settings. So when they are at school, classroom teachers are only teaching the kids who are in front of them, and the kids who are at home. So for example, kindergarteners, Allison owns Tuesdays as day 1 of the Tuesday-Wednesday configuration, and Thursdays as day 1 of the Thursday-Friday. So kids on Tuesday in kindergarten will have art, Tuesday or Thursday, will have art from 8:30 to 9:15. On Wednesdays or Fridays, the second day of their 2 days remotely, they will have music. From 9:30 to 10:15, I'm just taking kindergarten, they will have SEL classes, and then PE would be from 10, this is a slightly different time frame, 10:30 to 11:15, so that they would have about a half days of course classes. Additionally, they will be signing in the morning, and the teachers will be assigning them activities related to reading and math and other areas.
Entonces,
Go ahead.
para las clases especiales, social, emocional y de tecnología, se ha decidido que en el primer trimestre el grupo A va a recibir solamente música, el grupo B va a recibir solamente arte, el grupo C solamente va a recibir la clase de social emocional. Tecnología y educación física, ellas van a enseñar a los grupos completos los 3 trimestres. Para la clase de tecnología, Miss Crisis solo va a enseñar a los niños de 2º a 5º grado. Los estudiantes de kinder y primero, ella va a reunirse con las maestras, hablar de las destrezas que los niños deben de aprender, y las maestras de kinder y primero le van a enseñar a los niños. Entonces, por ejemplo, si tomamos la clase de kinder, cuando ellos estén virtualmente aprendiendo en la casa, su día va a ser básicamente estas clases. También la maestra del salón le va a dar práctica de matemática, y entonces que practiquen las lecturas. Entonces, para el día de kinder virtual sería de 8:30 a 9:15. El grupo que le toque martes o jueves va a tener arte. Los miércoles, música, el grupo que le toque a esa hora. Educación física para kinder, entonces va a ser 10:30 a 11:15. Y entonces la clase de social emocional de 9:30 a 10:15. Entonces, cuando ellos estén en la casa aprendiendo, van a ser parte de estas clases con las maestras virtualmente.
And you can see that we've tried to keep it the same if we need to go into distance, either because of an outbreak or because of a particular class, so that we have predictability and we don't have to go between, too many different kinds of scenarios. So in the first 6 weeks of school, we normally spend that time building community as part of responsive classroom. But this particular year, we are going to be focusing a lot on assessing students and seeing where they are, and creating individual learning plans for math and literacy. Really focusing on safety, what it means to be safe in a school in times of COVID. Connecting all of that to the units, and so thinking about civic responsibility, thinking about care for elders and people who are sick, learning the science of it, the new habits of being in this building, and then lastly, the social and emotional piece. We know that people have been in a variety of circumstances and just not being in school, really focusing on the social and emotional aspect of being back together.
Entonces, las primeras 6 semanas queremos dedicarlas a evaluar a los niños, a ver cómo están al principio del año. Vamos a hacer evaluaciones en lectura, matemática, escritura y lenguaje. Y entonces, a través de esas evaluaciones, vamos a crear los planes de lectura individual y de matemática. Ese es el PLPLPMP. También vamos a estar aprendiendo en la primera unidad del bachillerato internacional cómo estar seguro y sano en la escuela. Cuál es la responsabilidad civil de cada uno de nosotros. Cómo estar seguro, cuáles son las prácticas de seguridad. Les vamos a enseñar la tecnología que los niños necesitan para entonces poder hacer ese trabajo en la casa, que el año pasado fue como de carrera y de verdad no pudimos prepararlos bien. Y entonces también vamos a estar enfocados en lo social emocional, todos los sentimientos que abarcan esto, todo cómo aprender a lidiar y vivir en este mundo nuevo.
Okay, so I'm going to respond to a couple of the questions that came up in the chat. So in terms of student groupings, that is a to-do for us, but we will be putting siblings together. So for example, we have 2 sets of twins, one existing, one incoming. Normally we separate them. We would put them in the same group, and we would also put siblings in the same number. So 1s, 2s, or are A, B, and C and 1s or 2s, so that they are coming in at the same time. Similarly, with other community pods that exist. So there's some people who carpool, they've already been sharing time together. So that will help us with reducing the number of people dropping kids off and coming to school. In terms of drop off and pickup, we will be having, it's going to be a lot more cars, I guarantee you, because people are less comfortable based on your feedback with transportation. That street on the side would still be a place to drop kids off if we partially were to block off the street during school hours. Again, but kids will have a very specific way to line up. Parents will not be getting out of cars. And kids would be standing there, or again, if parking, but a place for parents to stand. There were a series of questions about safety and mixing students. There is a daily attestation that needs to be submitted by parents that your child is coming to school healthy. We will not be doing temperature checks at every day with every student. It causes lines. Some kids can be asymptomatic, and we're hoping that through the attestation that nobody would send their child with a fever. However, if anybody comes down with any symptoms that are COVID symptoms, which is basically anything, they would go to the nurse and be sent home immediately. If there is a case, and be required to be tested for COVID. If there is a case of COVID, then again, the stable pod, we call the Department of Health, or a greater percentage of students would have to be immediately go into the distance learning plan, and we would shut down. The reason why we have groups of students here on 2 days and home on 2 days is because we need to do the cleaning in between them coming back into different classrooms. We will be cleaning every day and every night, but a more thorough cleaning on Wednesday night before a second pod comes in, as well as the time of the evening, because air droplets can survive for a couple of hours. Mucha información, Rosa, disculpa.
So, la primera pregunta, ¿vamos a poner a los hermanos en los mismos grupos? So, en 1A, Hermanos pueden estar todos en 1A dependiendo del grado para que todos puedan venir a la misma vez y estén en la casa en la misma vez. También vamos a poner niños que ustedes nos dejen saber que ellos estén juntos en la casa, amiguitos, o que alguien, una mamá va a traer a varios niños de diferentes familias. Los vamos a poner en los mismos grupos también, porque también queremos reducir el número de carros que vengan todos los días. Los niños van a salir de los carros por la mañana y van a ver espacios designados a donde ellos se van a parar. Los padres no van a poder entrar a la escuela, no pedimos que no salgan de los carros. What was the second question, Julie? That was about...
If there's an outbreak of COVID, if we're testing for fever.
Wasn't there something before that? Maybe not. Okay. Sí, todos los días, no vamos a tomarle la temperatura a los niños todos los días. Eso va a crear líneas y entonces tiempo que los niños van a estar fuera de su grupo estable. En vez le vamos a pedir a los padres que hagan un testamento todos los días que están mandando a los niños a la escuela saludables. Si un niño durante el día tiene síntomas, le dan síntomas de COVID, que puede ser cualquier cosa, inmediatamente sacamos a ese niño del salón, lo ponemos en el salón de aislamiento, entonces la enfermera Rosa va a llamar a los padres para que inmediatamente vengan a buscar a los niños. Entonces ella va a llamar al departamento de salud para ver qué hace con el resto del grupo. Y entonces el resto del grupo puede que a partir de ese día tenga que continuar con la educación virtual hasta que pase el tiempo de incubación. There was something else you said.
I think that was it. Whether we would shut down the whole pod or...
Yeah. Entonces, la razón por que tenemos a niños enfocados
Rosa, you're
es poder... ¿A moi?
breaking up.
No.
La razón que tenemos grupos que vienen el martes y miércoles y otro grupo el jueves y viernes es porque necesitamos limpiar bien entre los dos grupos ocupando el mismo aula. Vamos a limpiar todo el tiempo y tenemos más gente que van a limpiar, pero no queremos cambiar, por ejemplo, en el medio del día porque hay un cierto número de horas que tenemos que tener entre cuando los, no sé cómo se dice, air droplets se aparecen.
Cuando el virus, como tenemos que reducir ese tiempo mientras que el virus esté en el aire o como los microbios estén en el aire.
There was another question about what teachers have done for professional development in virtual learning. And so this is one of the challenges with not knowing soon enough which plan we're doing, wanting to make sure that we can get ready as best we can for all. But we do have a list of professional development skills beyond just technology, dealing with students who are coming from situations of trauma, etc. And we are planning, instead of a day orientation, a week orientation for all staff, starting on the 17th of August. People are already starting, for example, the specials teachers to do professional development through Google and other ways for virtual learning.
Entonces, una de las preguntas fue cómo hemos estado preparando a los maestros para la instrucción virtual. Entonces, esta es otra de las razones porque queremos saber del Estado cuál es el plan que vamos a usar para poder implementar todas las posibilidades de desarrollo profesional. Algunos maestros, nuestra semana de desarrollo profesional va a empezar el 24 de agosto y ya los maestros especiales están tomando cursos de Google para aprender la tecnología.
So this is a point of view of a student. So for example, on your day one, if it's a Tuesday or if it's a Thursday, staggered arrival, morning meeting. Recess is now not just before lunch because of needing to really socially distance, not having 2 grades at once out. Open inquiry, IB or math, that's really the only change from a day 1 to day 2. Lunch routine, as I mentioned, is longer. Reading instruction, snack, cleanup, closing circle, and then the staggered dismissal.
Entonces, el día parcial o limitado, llegan por turno los niños de 8 a 8:45, tienen la reunión de la mañana. El recreo ahora es media hora en vez de 20 minutos y no, siempre lo hemos tenido justo antes del almuerzo por en nuestro responsive classroom, pero ahora porque queremos limitar los números y no queremos que diferentes grupos se encuentren en estos lugares afuera, lo tenemos a través del día. Indagación abierta, y entonces la única diferencia es un día van a tener las clases de bachillerato internacional y entonces el otro día matemática. Entonces, a continuación, la rutina de almuerzo, instrucción de lectura los 2 días. Entonces, al final del día, el círculo de cierre, merienda, recoger, limpiarse las manos, arreglarse para ir a la casa. Y entonces, a la 1:15, la despedida por turno.
And this would be the distance learning, again, trying to have some continuity, but students would just not be at ICS.
Entonces, este sería el horario de aprendizaje a distancia para los niños, si tenemos esa rutina.
So before going on to talk a little bit about the budget, are there any, and I didn't open the chat, but any other questions about the schedule as it's been presented? It's a lot of information.
Antes de hablar de presupuesto, queremos saber que si tienen una pregunta o comentario sobre el plan instruccional. Entendemos que es mucha información.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
For the distance learning, will it still be a little bit more we can do it on our own time? Because that was kind of a huge thing. I couldn't really keep like the same schedule to get the stuff done at home.
Yeah, so there are a few competing factors there. So some of what we learned is that kids needed some time to be live with teachers and or each other. We also learned what you just said, Caitlin, is that parents don't always at times that allow them to be in certain places. So it's a balance, and our goal would be to provide both, right? So to provide time where we would have live meetings. You know, what was successful in some of our classes is that teachers scheduled those according to what worked with kids. So, 9 o'clock at night is not possible, but there were times that they could, based on morning or afternoon. So really a balance and trying to accommodate as best we can those competing needs of families as well as kids, socially interacting with one another.
Okay, so as long as it's not the live lessons, it can be a little bit looser scheduling at home. Okay, thank you.
Rosa.
Entonces la pregunta de la mamá fue si estamos en educación a distancia, si va a haber flexibilidad cuando los niños tienen que hacer su trabajo. Queremos crear un balance. En parte eso funcionó para muchos padres porque no tenían que estar en la computadora cierto tiempo. Pero entonces por el otro lado hay un beneficio inmenso si los niños están recibiendo lecciones en vivo en vez de un video con la maestra. Entonces vamos a hacer lo más que podamos para mantener ese balance y darle a los niños de verdad lo que necesitan, pero también entendiendo que los padres tienen diversos horarios.
So I do want to, were there other questions? I do want to talk about the budget because it is part of the reality. So if you click on this, it links you to the budget. And I'll just explain where we are presently.
Entonces, si usted toca esa pantalla con la alcancía, es un enlace y entonces abre esta página que es el presupuesto.
So our revenues for the year 2019-20, last school year, was $6 million. Normally, we get an increase of about 4 to 5%. However, the legislature has not passed the budget. And so the mechanism that kicks in then is you are level funded at the level for last year. So currently we are with $6 million in revenue. That could change if the legislature meets and passes a budget either higher or lower.
Entonces, el año pasado, nuestro presupuesto era $6 millones. Cada año dan un aumento de como 4%. Este año todavía no nos han dicho cuál va a ser la cantidad de dinero que vamos a tener. Entonces, estamos comenzando con el mismo cantidad del año pasado hasta que nos dejen saber. Puede que sea más o puede que sea esto.
We are anticipating a 20% cut based on state revenues.
Entonces estamos esperando que corten 20% del dinero que nos van a dar por el dinero que tiene que tiene el Estado.
We did apply for one of the small business loans, which we got, and so that is $600,000.
Nosotros aplicamos para un préstamo de negocios pequeños y nos dieron $600,000.
We also received $92,000 in Federal CARES Act, which is primarily to use for coming back and personal protective equipment.
Entonces también por el acto de CARES nos han dado $92,000 y eso básicamente es para las máscaras y los instrumentos protectivos.
So with taking away the 800,000 and adding back in, we are at 5,892, which is less than what we had last year. Our expenses, just because of the cost increases with things like health insurance, et cetera, is $6,100,000. So you can see there's a disparity of a couple $100,000. This expenses of $6,100,000 is with no cost of living increase for any staff member and no step increase for any teacher. And without any of the costs of renovating the building, getting protective equipment, et cetera. To come back full in person, it will cost us $1.3 million more than what we normally spend. So that puts us at a $1.5 million deficit. To come back partially, it's less expensive, but it doesn't erase all those costs because you still have people in the building. That puts us at $1 million loss. And to come back full distance puts us more or less even at $100,000 surplus.
Entonces, todos estos presupuestos, en todos estos presupuestos no estamos contando que, a los maestros no le van a dar un aumento, no le van a dar el COLA. Entonces, quitando los 800,000 y agregando los otros números, las otras cantidades, igual nos faltan como $1 millón para regresar en persona 100%. Nos faltan $1,077,000 para regresar parcialmente, porque todavía necesitamos que el personal esté en el edificio. Y si regresamos a distancia completamente, entonces tenemos, nos sobra dinero.
And you can click on any of these to see the backup for them. This is the CARES Act, for example. Buses would be a huge expense if we were to get enough buses in order to accommodate those who want to ride the bus. It's increasing salaries because we're adding, sorry about the drawing, but it's kind of fitting that we have a child's drawing here. We need an additional day porter, a nurse's aide, and we want to have, if you go back to the floor plan, we want to have a primary classroom teacher as well as an aide, either shared by 2 teachers, or as in KN1 and in 4th grade, we always have a dedicated aide. So that because we will be eating lunch in the classrooms, for example, teachers need to take a break if they need to go to the bathroom. We also don't want to be bringing in substitutes who've been in other districts. And so having, again, if I go back to that floor plan, sorry. Rose, I don't know if you want to talk about that while I open up the floor.
Las páginas de abajo que está señalando Miss Julie son todos los estudios que se han hecho para llegar a ese presupuesto, esas cantidades. Para los salarios hemos aumentado la cantidad de adultos que van a haber en la escuela. Normalmente las clases de kinder y primero tienen maestros asistentes en cada clase. Ahora queremos ponerle asistentes en los grados 2 a 5, como 2 grupos compartiendo un asistente. También porque para ayudar a los niños académicamente, pero también para darle la oportunidad a la maestra, a los maestros de poder ir al baño, tomar 5 minutos a través del día y todavía tener a alguien que cuide a los niños. Adicionalmente, necesitamos otra persona que limpie durante el día y necesitamos un asistente de enfermera para que ayude a la enfermera con los niños.
And one of the things that the governor's office has said directly to me is there will be outbreaks, right? And so when there are outbreaks, it could be an adult or a child. And if that's the case, then we also will need for somebody to take over a class if a teacher has to leave suddenly. And having the consistency of a shared partner teacher, again, is preferred to bringing somebody in cold for a variety of reasons, both in terms of continuity of learning as well as safety.
Entonces, además, una posición más, queremos un maestro sustituto que esté constantemente en ICS. No queremos que personas vayan a otros distritos, otras escuelas, entonces vengan a sustituir. La otra razón por tener un asistente en los salones es porque, como la gobernadora ya nos ha dejado saber, van a haber personas que le va a dar COVID. Entonces queremos que haya otra persona en el salón viendo las lecciones, sabiendo lo que se está aprendiendo para que pueda seguir con la instrucción de los niños.
So just quickly to talk about the calendar, as I mentioned, there is now a statewide calendar. It starts on August 31st for everybody. We normally start before Labor Day, but many districts don't. And because they predicted that we would be closing down close to flu season, they wanted to get as many days in before that. Mondays are either Professional Development Day or holidays or our own professional development days and planning days. In the statewide calendar, they did put in 3 religious holidays, 1 Muslim, 1 Jewish, and 1 Christian holiday. Because at ICS, we have a tradition of not celebrating any, but acknowledging all. They also only had, they had us going, leaving on December, going to school the 21st, 22nd, and 23rd of December. So we took those 3 religious holidays and put them here because we normally have families, again, I don't think anybody's going to be traveling, but who take that time in December and January.
Entonces ICS va a seguir el calendario estatal. Le hemos hecho varios cambios. En En el calendario que dio la gobernadora hay 3 días religiosos que ellos van a tomar. Nosotros en ICS reconocemos los días religiosos, pero no los tomamos. Entonces, hemos cogido esos 3 días y los hemos agregado a la vacación de diciembre. Que ellos nos tenían saliendo para la vacación de diciembre el 24 de diciembre. Entonces, ahora vamos a salir el 21. What are the other?
Yo creo que es todo.
Yeah. Y entonces los lunes, como hay muchos días feriados y son los días de desarrollo profesional que nos ha dado el Estado, por eso los lunes van a ser días virtuales.
So, and we can open this up for conversation. But for us, the best case scenario is, and this gets back to Holly Beth's question at the beginning, but is that we have the autonomy to decide. The way it is currently being structured, we submit our plans for these 3 or 4 scenarios, and then the Department of Education is looking at them, and by the 31st, they will say, you know, your limited is good to go, your partial is good to go, you're missing this in the distance learning plan, or whatever it is, the feedback that they give us. And then on the 17th, that the governor says, based on the spread, everybody's going distance, or everybody's going full in person, or everybody's going partial. We don't think all buildings are created equal, and we don't think all communities have the same spread. We would like autonomy to choose the plan that is best for us. So that is one of our desires.
So, estas son las cosas que nosotros anhelamos. So, que queremos autonomía. No queremos necesariamente esperar hasta agosto 17 que la gobernadora diga, así está el estado de COVID aquí en Rhode Island, entonces vayan a este plan. Queremos decidir cuál es el plan que mejor funciona para nuestra comunidad y entonces empezar a prepararnos para ese plan.
Our board, after meeting a week ago Monday, sent a letter to the governor and to the Commissioner of Education saying that they could not in good faith recommend full in-person because of both safety concerns with being able to socially distance in the classroom with 22 students, as well as costs, as I just mentioned. So to consider the partial limited or the full distance is where we are feeling that we can be safe and more effective.
La semana pasada o antes pasada, la Junta de ICS le mandó una carta a la gobernadora explicando las razones por las cuales nosotros no podemos regresar 100% en persona y indicándole que nosotros en ICS preferimos regresar parcialmente o limitadamente.
O in full distancia.
O en distancia completa.
In terms of transportation, we need help with that. It is too expensive for us to do staggered buses to be able to socially distance on those buses. And so that would be one area where costs could be reduced tremendously if we could get some support from the state, which they've indicated that they are trying to do in order to help us with transportation.
El asunto de transportación para nosotros se hace muy caro tener el número de autobuses necesario para transportar a los niños en una forma segura y mantenerlos de 6 pies a distancia. Entonces también le hemos pedido a la gobernadora que nos ofrezca apoyo con la transportación porque no hay dinero para eso.
We also need financial support, as you saw from the budget. So if there's any way that there can be statewide leveraging of contracts, there's supposedly some federal funds, if our Congress is able to pass them, that will be passed on to schools. Because as you can see, even in the partial limited plan, we are operating at a deficit, which we are not allowed to do.
Además, le estamos pidiendo al Estado apoyo financiero para preparar el edificio, para comprar todas las cosas que necesitamos. Y acuérdense que hasta en el plan parcial y limitado estamos en una deficiencia de dinero.
As a state, as a country, we need to improve the turnaround time for tests. Opening a school with the current turnaround time, and I've personally dealt with this in more than one situation, of between 7 and 10 days is not going to allow us to adequately keep our community safe. So, and Rhode Island being a small state is competing against some of the bigger states. This is also something that the governor has acknowledged needs to improve. But honestly, I can't imagine any physical proximity if we don't have improved turnaround time.
Otra cosa que queremos es mejorar las pruebas de COVID. Ahora se toma 6 a 10 días para que regresen los resultados de las pruebas. Entonces, queremos que la gobernadora entienda que va a ser imposible abrir una escuela cuando estamos esperando 6 a 10 días para que vengan los resultados de esas pruebas.
And then we need a decision ASAP for some of the things that you all brought up to be able to really plan effectively for which of these scenarios we are going to be opening with.
Y entonces, finalmente, queremos que se tome una decisión tan pronto posible para poder planificar correctamente todo, como todo lo que hay que comprar, el desarrollo profesional, todo para este año escolar próximo.
I have a question, if that's okay.
Yep.
Thanks. I was wondering if the governor has addressed any of the budgetary issues and you know, the deficit that would be in and kind of how expensive it is to make all those changes to have in-person instruction or partial instruction. And if she hasn't, or if it hasn't been addressed, is there anything we can do, or do you think it's a good idea for us to make some sort of statement, or, you know, is there anything in that respect? So
Amy, la pregunta fue si la gobernadora ha resuelto la situación económica y si no, si hay algo que los padres pueden hacer. So, yes and no. So what I have heard is that they are really hoping that the current legislation before the Congress, the billions of dollars, that some of it will come to schools, will help. I did ask the question specifically of would it help to the tune of 1.5 for a small school like ICS. I don't know, based on everything I've seen of numbers, as you saw, my last two were 600 for the PPP and 92 for personal protective equipment. That doesn't add up to that amount that I still need. But that is one way they are looking to support, and they did say that they might be able to solve something like helping with transportation, which would cut costs for us. But I also had a conversation with somebody from the governor's office where they said you're gonna have to make tough decisions. And I think that's where it gets to be that you can't make any more tough decisions. You need to ensure a place that is safe for kids to come into. And so if you look at the next slide, one of the next steps for us is advocacy and organizing, you know, with other, either the League of Charter Schools, schools across the state, and having our parents as well, if they are comfortable, sending letters to their representatives, senators, and to the governor.
Entonces, contestando la pregunta, todavía no sabe el Estado cuánto dinero nos va a dar. Y entonces también viendo que necesitamos como 1 millón, no se sabe si nos van a poder dar esa cantidad. La otra cosa, como ya hemos dicho que hemos pedido, es que nos den ayuda con la transportación, pero en una conversación que tuvo Julie, básicamente dijeron que las escuelas van a tener que tomar decisiones serias. Entonces, ya hemos tenido que tomar tantas decisiones. Entonces, La otra cosa que vamos a hacer ahora es continuar con abogar por lo que necesitamos, y entonces sí, necesitaríamos que los padres también escriban cartas y se unan a ese proceso.
So this meeting today, the one last night, these are our efforts to continue to communicate where we are with the plans, to advocate for what I just mentioned. We need to continue to flesh out the plans, cut costs if we can, raise money, finalize policies. We have another board meeting on August 3rd where we're hoping to consider some of these, but as you can imagine, sick leave and other things have to change. To prepare for opening, to get ready, whatever that means, and providing all of the training that everybody needs, and then to open. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and just open this up for conversation. And if anybody, I haven't looked at the chat in a bit, but I will look at that. But if anybody wants to ask a question or make a comment, please unmute yourself and do so.
Entonces, si alguien quiere hacer una pregunta, un comentario, por favor, ahora, hágalo ahora.
I have a question.
Yes.
I have read something on Facebook that if a child had symptoms of COVID-19, they'll take the child and do the test without the parent being there. Is this real? Is this true?
No, I actually have been with people trying to get a test, and it's very hard to get a test. But no, we would not test. We would send the child home and the parent would give a test.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
La pregunta de la mamá es que ella leyó en Facebook que si los niños se enferman en la escuela durante el día, que la escuela le va a dar hacer una prueba de COVID sin el permiso del padre. Eso no es cierto. Nosotros no tenemos las pruebas en la escuela. No vamos a hacer eso.
So if somebody else wants to unmute and ask, I'll just address some of what I'm seeing in the chat in terms of masks. So right now, Rosa, the nurse, and I want all children to wear a mask. There will be some exceptions if they're outside, socially distanced, and if they're eating their lunch, but in the class, wearing a mask, unless there's a particular health reason that a child could provide a doctor's note. Masks for everyone all the time. We have a student in the building who is deaf, and so for some of the teachers and staff, we have see-through ones, and we're trying to get more of those because we know that makes it much easier to read emotion as well as lips for everybody, not just a person who's hard of hearing. We also have purchased, and if you look at the budget, you'll see the breakdown of the cost for the personal protective equipment, but face shields and plexiglass so that there can be times where a teacher could be safely behind a structure and be talking and could be seen.
So, la pregunta es sobre el uso de las máscaras. Y estamos pidiendo que todo el mundo, todos los niños usen una máscara mientras que estén en ICS. También por un niño que tenemos que es sordo, pero también para que todos tengan la oportunidad de usarlo, vamos a comprar máscaras transparentes para que los niños puedan ver la boca de las maestras, y también pantallas y como paredes bloqueadores de plexiglass para que hayan oportunidades para que los maestros no tengan que usar la máscara y los niños puedan ver la cara, la expresión y las palabras.
So the other, this is all a process. And so having conversations with staff and with parents, these are plans that we put together trying to bring everybody's perspective that we had up until this point. But for example, something that I just saw was, will parents be able to come and see the layout? And I could see how that would be reassuring. I had not thought of that. So that is something that we can add to our reentry plan, not on the first day and everybody with kids, but either we could do a virtual one or we can bring people in, because I think that would be really helpful. So it is helpful for us, to hear from you if there are ideas that you have, such as that one. In terms of transportation, if I can really bring that number down, by parents opting out, we are only required to provide it to students who have IEPs. However, there are some families who need it and their children don't have IEPs. But if I could reduce that from having 6 buses with staggered times, which brings me up to about $650,000, to having 1 bus with staggered time or 2 buses, that would help tremendously in terms of costs. So walking school buses for those who live close, but we also are a statewide school, and so there are those that don't. The governor had an idea of scooters, and it was the charter school leader who has a campus in Providence and Warren who explained that that wouldn't work going over I-195. But whatever creative ways that are safe, stable groups, cousins coming in the same car, not just anybody carpooling, but we want to try to really figure that out to get people here, and to do so in a way that's safe. So those are also all really good ideas.
Entonces, algunas ideas que ustedes han compartido, una es que si los padres van a poder ver la escuela ahora cómo va a estar arreglada antes que los niños vengan. No hemos pensado en eso, por eso sus comentarios y preguntas son tan importantes. Vamos a agregar eso a nuestro plan. Tal vez no sea todo el mundo a la misma vez, tal vez sea una visita virtual que le podamos dar, pero vamos a planificar eso. La otra pregunta de transportación, otra vez, va a costar mucho dinero transportar a todos los estudiantes que hemos transportado en estos años. Entonces estamos otra vez pidiéndole a la gobernadora que nos dé apoyo y pensando en otras posibilidades, como que niños vengan juntos con personas que ya han estado en sus casas. La gobernadora también dijo algo de montar patinetas, pero eso no va a funcionar. Entonces, cualquier idea que ustedes tengan, tal vez déjenos saber que eso es un problema, una situación que estamos todavía tratando de resolver.
There was another comment about the disparity in the impact on certain communities. And so we know from the data that a place like Central Falls and Providence and Pawtucket have higher rates of infection than some of the other communities. We also know that among certain subgroups of the population that there are higher incidents of it. And I would say that this is one thing that I have been trying, and when we look at that advocacy bullet, to make sure that the state is aware of, because they have said that they will be looking at solutions considering the different impact in different communities, but so far it's kind of a one-size-fits-all. As a state school with 80% of our population coming from Providence, Pawtucket, and Central Falls, and then those kids coming together and going back out, it's really important that this be understood and that we're looking at the rates of increase in those individual communities. So it's something we're thinking about. I have not seen a state solution to really taking that into account yet.
So, la pregunta es sobre el hecho que hay muchos casos de infección de COVID en ciertas comunidades como Central Falls, Providence y Pawtucket. Entonces, eso es parte de lo que Julie y la Junta ha estado hablando con la gobernadora y dejándoles saber estas diferencias, estas necesidades que existen. Eso es algo que la gobernadora ha dicho que va a tratar de resolver, pero hasta ahora los planes que ellos han dado es básicamente algo como que beneficia a todos, no necesariamente a tomando en cuenta estas comunidades.
I very much appreciate the ideas about getting here and bicycles and bicycle racks. I'm capturing this chat, and we will, try to be as creative as we can with how people get here and helping to incorporate that into daily, healthy living activities. And I also really think that idea of organizing parents into certain support groups is necessary, and that's a great idea. So we will take those ideas with us.
So, mirando las preguntas y comentarios, ideas sobre las formas que los niños pueden venir a la escuela, vamos a tomar todas estas ideas en cuenta y ser creativos en las formas que vamos a ayudar a los niños a llegar a la escuela. También gracias por los comentarios de los padres de crear grupos de apoyo para cada salón. Eso también va a ser increíblemente necesario en cualquier plan que sigamos.
Any other comments or questions?
¿Hay alguna pregunta, otro comentario?
So is that somebody about to? So I just want to say thank you. I know this is a lot of information. This is not easy in any scenario. And so we will do our best to, put in place something that, again, where safety is our primary concern, and that serves the needs of families, and to advocate for some statewide and national solutions to some of this. Schools cannot be expected to create unhealthy environments just to take care of childcare. And so we need to make sure that what we're doing is safe, and that our society in general starts to realize some of the challenges that exist for us.
Entonces les damos las gracias otra vez. Le hemos dado mucha información. Gracias por sus comentarios, ideas, su tiempo. Queremos que ustedes sepan que vamos a seguir abogando por los niños, abogando por traer a todo el mundo otra vez, darle una educación, pero una educación que ellos estén sanos y seguros en la escuela. So, sigan compartiendo sus ideas, sus comentarios y seguimos hablando.
And I want to go back into the question, the sign in, and leave a question again, or email us, or call our cell phones.
Well, how will you respond to those questions that we submitted on the form? Will you be sending out kind of will you be responding to the people who asked them, or how will we?
Yeah, so last night I looked at them from that meeting. We had another meeting last night and started to summarize the categories of them, and was waiting until today. And then I'll send something out to everybody with the things that maybe we're just clarifying, and the next steps when there are things that haven't been developed.
Entonces la pregunta de la mamá fue que cómo es que le vamos a mandar las respuestas a todas estas preguntas que ustedes han hecho. Entonces, Julie tuvo una reunión anoche, igual que esta, y ella ya ha comenzado a clasificar las preguntas y a contestar. Entonces vamos a agregar estas, y cuando todo esté contestado, le vamos a mandar toda la información a ustedes, de todas las preguntas.
All right, everybody, be safe. On my email at the bottom, I have the fifth grader wearing a mask, and I have the social distancing. Please make sure you are doing this and staying safe. This is how we are going to reduce the spread of this disease, and make sure you're talking with your kids and everybody.
I have something to say before you go. Yep. Since other parents were mentioning the taking temperature to the children, I could help or maybe we could get like somebody else and we could like share the days. Like one day I could do the 10% in the morning, then another parent can do it another day. Like mostly like volunteering since.
So Yadira, I will bring that back to the nurse. I know that it's going to be helpful, but also many children are asymptomatic.
Yeah.
And we also do want to, and I thank you for that offer, but we want to limit who it is that interacts with children for them as well as for us. And so, but I did hear that loud and clear in the comments, and I will bring that back to Rosa.
Entonces, lo de ser voluntaria y que tal vez que otros padres puedan ser voluntarios en tomarle la temperatura a los niños cada día. Entonces, Julie dijo que ella iba a hablar esto, a consultar a la enfermera Rosa para ver lo que ella piensa. También entiendan que queremos limitar quién tiene acceso a los niños y quién está en contacto con los niños diariamente. Entonces, eso es algo que tenemos que ver. Pero gracias.
Well, it is really good to see everybody, even though this is an odd setting. But we miss seeing you all, and I hope you enjoy the rest of summer. We will be in touch, and don't hesitate to reach out to us.
Thank you so much for this, Julie and Rosa.
Welcome.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Take care.
I'm going to stop recording.